When you think about super successful businesses that are selling through the roof like Heinz or Mattel, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But there's a secret. The business behind the business making selling simple for them and buying simple for their customers. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout as Heinz and Mattel. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/promo to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/promo.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. It's questions day, Kieran. The first question is, how have you been since we last saw each other? We had a lovely time at the cheerful, earful podcast festival. Lots of people came along. We sold out the room, which was lovely. We had a nice chat. You dropped a few bombshells, interesting information for people. We met some lovely fans. I'd like to thank the person who brought me along a ticket from a Wimbledon Crystal Palace 1994 Coca-Cola Cup game as a little thank you present. Despite the fact we lost that game, I didn't like to point that out to him, but it was a lovely gesture. And as always, Kieran, it's always nice to have a little queue of people afterwards to talk to for me, and a big queue of people after to talk to for you.
It was great. And we've managed to recruit two new secret people to join the pod for particular areas of the business of the game. So you know who you are. Just drop me an email to kieran@priceoffootball.com and I'll get that sorted. I managed to the only problem was, we finished the gig and sort of left around about 11 p.m. I was teaching at 9 o'clock the following morning in Liverpool. So that did involve getting to Euston, getting the 11:30 train to Wolverhampton. You've not lived until you've spent 3 hours at Wolverhampton station overnight, I've decided. So that was all good. And to be fair, there was no aggravation, and then caught the first train. So apologies probably to my students. I might not have been at my bouncy best. Because I'm irritatingly cheerful even in class. Even the students say that. Why can't you be miserable like us? It's a 9 o'clock lecture. Live to fight another day.
Even you at your bouncy best is still very chipper, not chippy. That's me. Sorry, that's me. I like the fact you say our two new recruits to our secret army may know who they are, because I don't, and I was in the same room with them the other night. You didn't even trust me to introduce them to me when you were recruiting them, which is probably for the best.
It was the Price of Football handshake that did it.
Oh, I see. What areas of expertise are they offering us, Kieran?
We've got the secret broadcaster, a new secret broadcaster. We've got our existing secret broadcaster who can tell us tales of daring do from the setting up of the Premier League. So we've got a new secret broadcaster. And we've got a new secret northerner who can tell us exclusive tales from what's happening in the northwest of England.
Oh, a secret northerner. Oh, that's interesting. Well, I didn't hear anyone moaning about the price of the beer in the pub the other night, so you kept him well hidden. Well done.
Or her.
Absolutely. Sorry, kid. I was just jumping to conclusions based on our demographic, basically. Yes, our other secret broadcaster, I'm sure, won't mind. He's not based in the north. Also, we're trying to get him on because he was very interested in the Alex Finn interview we had. It's about the origins of the Premier League, but he had some other details and some disagreements. So that'd be interesting if we can persuade him on. But then he wouldn't be the secret broadcaster anymore, would it?
That's right.
I've just seen through my own. I've been hoisted by my own petard there. We have some very good questions today, Kieran, including I think the most mysterious question we've had for quite some time in terms of its origin. But the first question comes from Ollie Daly. And Ollie says, we often hear about collective bargaining agreements when it comes to European football, such as in relation to Mbappe's temporary marginalisation in the PSG bomb squad. Just wanted to know whether the PFA has similar collective agreements with the Premier League and Football League, and if so, what they include.
Well, very much so. The Premier League and the PFA have had a very long-standing collective bargaining agreement, much to the regret, I suspect, of the Premier League, and it's something which they've tried to renegotiate on many an occasion, only to be rebuffed, and quite understandably so. The nature of the agreement is that the PFA are effectively entitled to a percentage of the broadcast deal, which goes into the PFA, and then that is used. It's used for education. It's used for counselling. It's used for welfare. Also research. We've got this issue in relation to dementia and professional footballers, which does need more funding, which does need greater investigation. We've had Maheta on the show, friend of the show. And certainly from my point of view, I'm now involved on the education side with the PFA, delivering their courses, and they are offering players an opportunity to transition out of the dressing room into different areas of the football business, as opposed to, I think historically, the viewpoint has been that players can move from playing to being a coach to being a physio. Well, why should they constrain themselves? Why should they be limited as to their opportunities? So the PFA is doing fantastic work in my view, and I appreciate that. I work with them and I've got to know them pretty well. But that's the main benefit, and they did sign I think it was a 5-year deal in 2023 with the PFA, and the PFA seems happy. I know that there's been some club owners who've been a bit chippy about it, saying, why should we give a proportion of the broadcast deal to the PFA? Well, it's because of the players whom the people come to watch. It's not you billionaire owners. So, why can't everybody share that? The clubs have benefited from the TV deal. If the value of the TV deal goes down, then the PFA would suffer. So it is their members who are providing the quality of the football. It's been some cracking football over the weekend that has driven up the interest in the game.
Has there been some cracking football, Kieran? I don't know. You know my views. I don't watch anything until Palace haven't won. And technically they didn't play, but they haven't won. So I can't watch. I'll tell you, I understand Wolves were hard done by, but Wolves do seem to be on the wrong end of some terrible VAR decisions in the last 18 months. Not that I wasn't delighted, because I'm already looking at the bottom of the table. But Mark has our next question. Now, Kieran, Guy, Mark will all know my views on one-name questions. But Mark's a Millwall fan, and we know from experience that Millwall fans seem to be reluctant to give their surname for some reason. For example, the question we had the other night at the live show, which came from Bermondsey Barry, I believe, rather than just some Millwall fans seem just, I don't know why they're so reluctant. Always very smartly dressed, but, reluctant to give their surname. Mark says, I was once asked... I love the way Mark qualifies his question as well. I was once asked how I'd use £100 million if I won the lottery, and I somehow reached the conclusion that I'd love to use £10 million of it to help my club Millwall purchase a couple of players who would normally be outside of the club's budget. Only once have we spent more than £2 million, apparently, says Mark. I was wondering how this payment would get treated in the club's accounts. Can it be classed as a grant? I can't see how else it could be accounted for. It wouldn't be a loan, as I wouldn't want repayment, and I can't see a sensible owner giving away equity in return for such a generous and selfless donation, says Mark. I mean, you say it's a generous and selfless donation, Mark. It's only 10% of the money you've won on the lottery. So it's not that generous and selfless, is it, really? But, I mean, this is something that arises all the time, Kieran. It's even in live gigs and off stage the other night. If there's a lot of people that the amount of football fans who are expecting to win the lottery, I think it's only going to be about 30 quid each if they all win it at the same time. Obviously, I'm one of them. As you know, I want to win the lottery, buy the club and get a proper kit back. But how would this be dealt? If somebody like Mark just bowled up at Millwall and said, I've got 10 million quid for you, how do they account for it?
Well, what they would do is that they would probably classify it as exceptional income. unless Mark wanted to perhaps sponsor the training facilities for a couple of years. If we take a look at Wolves' accounts from 2020, 2021, and of course, just like you, I'd go to page 32 of those accounts, and there was £126 million gift from the owners to Wolverhampton Wanderers that year in the form of writing off a loan, which ironically today would be presumably raising eyebrows in respect of associated party transactions, but in those days it was deemed to be perfectly normal. So that's the way it would be included. There could be complications because the EFL might say we need to take a look at this from a fair value point of view, and PSR. But if Mark was sort of smart, puts the money in and effectively releases it over the same period of time as the contracts, it would offset the amortization charge, and that way the club would effectively be PSR neutral in my view. So that's how it would be treated. But he's absolutely right. I don't think the owners would want to give away shares, and in terms of a loan that he's never going to ask for the money back, then it would be a bit pointless to classify it that way as well.
Now, back in the day, Kieran, before FFP and PSR was really a thing, at Palace and other clubs, individuals and local businesses could sponsor various players' shirts, shorts, etc. And four of us, we sponsored Gary Stebbings shorts for a while, which I believe is a half man, half biscuit B-side. But Howard, and I understand that there are teams further down the league in which that is still the case, where individuals. So, what happens in terms of FFP, PSR in that case? Is it calculated at the end as a lump sum? Do they add up all the individual payments and then put that forward as a sponsorship lump sum?
They do. That would go under sort of the broad umbrella heading of commercial revenues. So as we're aware, that what clubs have to do for their submissions to the football authorities is that they split their money between match day, broadcast and commercial. And that is sponsorship, because you normally would end up with your name in the programme either on a weekly basis or once or twice a season. So therefore, in theory, the club is providing you with advertising and marketing services for your position in terms of the relation with the club. And then they would, as you rightly said, they'd add it up for all of the sponsorship deals. I've sponsored players' shirts in the past as well, and it just goes into that much broader pot.
Okay. Liam Blaney has a very interesting question, actually, Kieran. And Liam says, at what level do the costs of being part of a league outweigh the benefits? I assume that in the Premier League and the EFL, because of the television deals, the leagues generate more benefit for clubs than they take in fees, and maybe National League too. Below that, does it actually cost more for clubs to be part of a league than they get in benefit? Where is the point where it switches from cost to benefit? Now, we do discuss this in our book, Kieran, which has just come out on paperback, that lower down the league, there are times when clubs would probably rather not get promoted because of the amount it's going to cost them to upgrade grounds, facilities, etc.
That's right, and I think we go through starting off in the park, and then your first cost as you move through the leagues is that of a rope, which you need, and then it moves to changing rooms, and there's certain sizes of changing rooms which those increase, separate changing rooms for the referee and assistant referees and so on. Then it moves to you must have a certain number of seats and so on. I would say that the cut-off point in terms of when benefits cease to exceed costs would be at step 7, and step 7 is Isthmian League, Northern Prem, Southern League Central, and Southern League South, and that's one step below the National League North and National League South, because at least at National League, and we've got archives from the National League coming on the show in a few weeks. So again, if anybody's got any questions for Mark, polite questions, of course, then we'd be delighted to hear from them. So at that stage, Northern Prem, you've not got a TV deal. you've had to upgrade your facilities. It could be argued that the step up from step 7 to step 6 is also one where, although you get some TV money, the demands of the National League in terms of improvement of facilities could outweigh, certainly if you're only there for one season or a couple of seasons, could outweigh the benefits. But if you are that team, if you are that club owner or that club collective, fair play to you for all the work that you put in. I would imagine the excitement of getting to that stage in football would, there's big teams at that level, would be intangible benefits, if not financial.
Yeah, I should stress to new listeners who might be slightly bemused, the rope is for putting around the pitch. It's for distinguishing your pitch from. I mean, there are certain eyebrows being raised, going, "What do they want rope for?" They're taking exception to the referee's decisions. Are they that upset by what's going on? Are they enjoying themselves perhaps too much afterwards? A little light bondage session? Who knows? It's for putting. It's for putting around her pitch. Also enabled me in the book to do a rather laboured money for old rope pun. There you go. Graham Constantine, or Constantine, I know a couple of Constantines, and they argue constantly. It's like Shrewsbury, whether it's Constantine or Constantine. So, Graham, I apologise if I've gone for the wrong one. Has a question that we have sort of skirted around, but it's a question around the regulator that, again, it's one of those things that we're always being asked off screen, so to speak. And Graham says, the King's Speech talked about the government introducing the idea of an independent regulator. But, says Graham, FIFA have a history of suspending a country when the government interferes with the running of the game, as they did with Nigeria at one stage. Is this not essentially what this is if the Football Governance Bill goes through? I mean, this has been a subject for some debate, Kieran, isn't it, as to where interference with the game, again, when the Super League came in, the government were kind of at sixes and sevens to know whether they could personally step in to prevent it, because then that might contravene FIFA regulations.
Yes, my understanding is that the people who have been responsible for drafting the bill at all times have been in communication with FIFA. The whole point about having an independent regulator is also independent from government. So the appointment is likely to be made by civil servants as opposed to ministers. The regulator, and I've spoken to people who may or may not be applying for the regulator's role. Certainly, the people that I've had communication with are fiercely independent. You would not mess with them, and they would take no truck in terms of government interference. So I think FIFA are, first of all, absolutely right to highlight, stay in your lane to a certain extent. Don't get involved with the operational activities of leagues, of individual clubs. But the purpose of the Football Governance Bill is to have an enhanced owners and directors test, which isn't to do with the running of the bill, running of the game. It's to do with the protection. Secondly, is to look at sustainability issues in terms of financial distribution. And thirdly, to preserve the heritage of the game with regard to shirt colours, badges, moving stadiums. Whether it would go as far as preventing clubs from playing matches overseas, I'm not certain. I suspect it probably wouldn't, because ultimately that's the decision of the leagues themselves. So that's where we are. We have had one or two chats with DCMS, and we are hoping at some point in the near future to be able to get a sports minister onto the show. I appreciate Lisa Nandy's got, we've got a new government in 1,001 things to deal with. But, we spoke to Stuart Andrew, the former sports minister. Of course, we've spoken to Tracy on many an occasion, Dame Tracy, of course. We'd like to have a dialogue where we can communicate questions from fans and also just to see on the progress of the bill. I'm hoping that there will be progress very, very shortly.
Yeah, we have had a commitment from the Minister for Sport to come on to the show. It's just a question of tying down dates. I think it's worth stressing for Graham as well, Kieran, that FIFA are not going to pick a fight with the FA over this issue. I would be surprised if they do. And also in the past, when FIFA have interfered, it's when governments have actually stepped in to take over. I mean, the Nigerian FA went completely bankrupt. Or there were issues around money, so the Nigerian government decided they were going to run football, and FIFA decided that wasn't going to be allowed. So FIFA have only ever stepped in, I think, 3 or 4 times, and they're in extreme cases, aren't they? So, and as you say, you would imagine that the people who drafted the bill would be fully aware of FIFA's attitude to this, and will find a way to make sure they don't overstep that. Can you overstep an attitude? I don't know.
Absolutely. And remember that the government does interfere with football in the sense that we do have legislation which prevents fans from drinking alcohol at matches.
Fair point.
There is legislation which prevents fans from selling tickets on the secondary market, which doesn't apply to other sports. So football is treated differently by the governments, and FIFA has never historically got involved with this. So, I think you have to be very careful with regards. And FIFA, as you rightly said, FIFA's view of what constitutes interference is a relatively narrow, but I think it's actually a very fair one. And whilst FIFA comes in for a fair amount of stick, some of which is justified, on this, I think they actually are trying to uphold the independence of the game.
Jamie McAllister has our next question. He's a Coventry City fan. And Jamie says, with Coventry getting a new owner not that long ago, although with the waiting list to now questions, Kieran, not that long ago is a movable feast. Some fans are raising their eyebrows at the money they are spending or not spending. But when you look at everything else, it seems to be going pretty smoothly, which I think for a while there, a few years back, pretty smoothly was an ambition that Coventry fans would have happily taken. With Mike Ashley owning the Coventry Building Society Arena, some fans think that if he was to own the club, he would get us to the Premier League, as he likes to make money, and because he is, in inverted commas, a businessman, therefore suggesting that getting into the Premier League is a profitable venture, which I don't believe is true, especially listening to you guys for the past couple of years. What is your opinions on this, and did Mike Ashley ever make any money when he was owner of Newcastle United? It's an interesting question, Jamie, and again, it reflects the view of most fans that getting into the Premier League is the be and all and end all. And there's no point being a football club if you're not in the Premier League. And I think most of us can testify that's not that I don't want to be out of the Premier League, Kieran, but I think most of us can testify that being in a league that you're never going to win is a rather strange situation.
Yes, it's a classic case of it's better to travel than to arrive with regards to the Premier League. And I'm not ignoring the fact that the quality of the football has been sensational, and there are some great memories, both good and bad. And that's the great thing about football, is that you buy your ticket and you don't know what's going to happen for the next 90 minutes. In respect of Coventry Building Society and the history of Mike Ashley, I think if I deal with Jamie's second question first. Mike Ashley financially probably just made a small profit. He sold Newcastle United for 310 million. I think he bought it for around about 130, 140, but he then loaned the club roughly the same amount of money. So he wrote off those debts when he left Newcastle. So effectively he put in just short of 300, walked away with a wee bit more. Mike Ashley is a person that traditionally, in my view, knows the value of a business, and he's a controversial figure. He's a figure who it's easy to dislike. He's very good at what he does from a business point of view. I think he got his trousers taken down with regards to the sale price of Newcastle United. And the reason why I say that is that Newcastle United were sold for approximately twice their annual revenue. Chelsea were sold for 5 times their annual revenue when they were sold to the Bowley Group. And remember, Chelsea were a distressed asset. Manchester United, with offshore Jim coming in, were sold for 7 times their revenue. Now, does that mean that PIF got a bargain? I think they got really good value. We've certainly Ipswich Town were valued at 250 million when they had investment come into the club in January. And no disrespect at all to Ipswich, because I think their achievements over the course of the last couple of years have been sensational. To say that nobody would inherently say that if Ipswich are worth 250, then Newcastle are worth 310, and those are fair values. I think part of the reason why Newcastle went at a relatively low price was, and you've got to give some credit to the Newcastle United fans here, was that Mike Ashley had become a toxic owner. And that was reflected in what the club was able to achieve in terms of its sponsorship deals, and the fact that they were having to not give away tickets to make St James's Park look full, but that there were issues in that many Geordies had become so disillusioned that they would perhaps buy a ticket and not turn up as part of a broader protest issue. So that's the second issue. He got his money back. He didn't lose any money. He didn't make a fortune. It could also be argued that if you take a look at some of the sponsorship arrangements that Newcastle United had with the likes of Sports Direct, that Mike Ashley was the major beneficiary from those, in the sense that Sports Direct were getting very, very good deals from their point of view, perhaps better than the club. In relation to Mike Ashley buying Coventry City Football Club with a view to trying to accelerate their opportunity to get into the Premier League, certainly when Newcastle were relegated in 2015-16, I think it was, and then they were promoted the next season, he spent a lot of money, or rather he released the budget to ensure that they returned to get back to the Premier League straight away. Was that him being generous? I don't think so. He was looking after Mike Ashley's best interest. If he was trying to sell the club, a lot easier to sell it in the Premier League than the Championship. How much does it cost you to get out of the Championship? The past few seasons, with the possible exceptions, ironically, of Ipswich, who we just mentioned, and Luton Town, it's been costing clubs £1 million a week. The season, I think it was Fulham, Bournemouth, and another one, I think it's been Leeds went up, or whatever it was. They all lost £1 million a week in getting promoted. So it's a pricey thing. You've also got clubs such as Bristol City in the Championship, and their owner has put in £20 million a year for the last 6 or 7 years. So if Mike Ashley is going to try to consider buying the club, which I don't think he will, and B, then provide the budget, it's going to have to be an awful lot of money. Is he willing to do that? I'm not so certain.
How much would he be earning annually by owning the stadium?
He's renting the stadium out to the football club. I think he did that partly out of spite, because he was involved in the potential acquisition of Derby County when the stadium was not part of the administration. And I think it's fair to say that Mel Morris wasn't a big Mike Ashley fan. So the one thing that Mel Morris was able to do was to quote a rental figure which may have been prohibitive to Ashley. And Ashley, I suspect, thought, right, if that's been done to me, I'm going to do that to somebody else. So he will be generating decent rentals from the football club.
Okay. In an ideal world, though, as a Coventry fan, you'd rather the club and the ground weren't owned by two such different people, wouldn't you?
Yeah, because you're not always pulling in the same direction. We've seen at times where you might have a club with a fan base which would warrant an expansion, and the landlord isn't interested in that, or the landlord might start trying to do rent reviews or not pay for substantial maintenance. And again, a criticism that can be levelled at Mike Ashley was that the investment in maintenance at St James's Park over the period of his ownership was very low. I actually set up a spreadsheet and I went through every single year. And again, this is not disrespecting our clubs, but the fact that Palace and Brighton had spent more on infrastructure than Mike Ashley had done on Newcastle, when we've got grounds which are in more expensive locations in the country and grounds which are far smaller, is indicative of his style of management.
Oh, I might have a walk to Selhurst later and see where that spending was made on the infrastructure. It wasn't made on removing the columns that stopped me seeing half the... Anyway. Jacob Bartnick has our next question. We managed to go through the whole live show the other night, Kieran, without one question on amortisation.
Yes, it was great.
We had about 100 questions from the audience. We got through them all, but not one on amortisation, which is really annoying because we've got a really good routine set up about amortisation, which I couldn't find a way of crowbarring it in, unfortunately. Although, with hindsight, possibly for the better. But Jacob Bartnick says, my question is driven by Chelsea's strategy of long contracts and the UEFA creating new rules that mean amortisation can only apply to 5 years of a contract. So say Chelsea were to sign a player for £100 million on a 5-year contract. After 1 year, 20 million would go through the P&L. If Chelsea were then to renew this player's contract and offer them another 5-year deal, would that mean they could amortise the remaining 80 million over 5 years, essentially costing only 16 million the next year?
I think that's a very fair question, Jacob. Credit to both the UEFA and the Premier League, even though I'm actually opposed to these rules. I think Chelsea are perfectly entitled to amortise player contracts over their full life. It's their risk, in my view. For example, if they sign a goalkeeper on a 7-year contract who can't kick the ball, then that's their problem for the next 7 years. Not that we're still bitter. So in relation to that, it will be 5 years from the first signing of the contract. So you can even sign a player on an 8-year contract at Chelsea or any other club, but for PSR purposes, for FFP purposes, it will be classified as being a 5-year contract. So what you'll have to do is a similar position to if you are a company and you're filling in your tax return, you add back your accounting amortization or depreciation, and then there are specific rules instituted by HMRC, and you subtract those in order to work out your PSL profit. It is adding to the administration and the aggravation for clubs, though, all of this.
Now, here's an interesting one, Kieran, / exciting, because you know my views on anonymous questions, but here we have a reason, because this is, and I'm quite excited about reading this out. It says, question from, and then it says, name redacted because of the NDA, which is great. And you know it's different because producer guy's using square brackets for the name redacted because of the NDA, yes, where normally he goes straight for the normal curvy bracket. Is that the correct grammatical term? Using the curvy bracket. But anyway, the question from name redacted because of the NDA is this. I'm aware a club is seeking to buy back its ground utilising a community interest company. And then in curvy brackets, it says I'm supporting on a specific deal, but tied up with an NDA. I wondered what the implications could be from a financial fair play angle, i.e., can the club use costs for the stadium to be offset, as permitted under FFP, if its ownership is in a separate CIC?
Well, the answer to this, that'd be really good on the back of a shirt, wouldn't it? Name redacted due to...
Wouldn't
it, We're going back to Millwall fans. I think a few of them might consider this. Uncle Terry, certainly.
Old Uncle Redacted. He's coming around at Christmas. Who's that present from? It says name redacted here.
Father who? If the ownership of a stadium is transferred to a separate entity, and effectively going back to the question that we've just had with regards to Mike Ashley and Derby and so on, then there would have to be a tenancy agreement between the football club and the CIC, the Community Interest Company, and the football club would be able to charge the rent that is being agreed with the CIC as an expense, and that would flow through into the FFP calculations. I think it would be unusual for there to be a holding company to own both the CIC and the football club. So it would then come down to having separate entities and a tenancy agreement. And this is the issue that Coventry City have, the rent that they pay. Now, in the case of Coventry City and Mike Ashley, I would imagine it will be at a market rate. But then if we look at what's happening at West Ham pay a below market rate, in my view, and they are the beneficiaries there. So it's only the £3.6 million that they paid last season for the rental of the London Stadium. Admittedly, it's only for 25 to 30 days. That goes through as part of their cost and therefore goes into their PSR calculations.
Could you clarify, Kieran, or define what a community interest company is? Because we quite often deal at the foundation with groups that you would expect to be charities who are doing very good stuff, but it turns out they're not charities, they're community interest companies.
Yeah, a community interest company is different to a standard private limited company. The purpose of a company is normally deemed to act in the best interests of shareholders, and the best interests of shareholders traditionally has been to make as much money for the shareholders as possible. With a community interest company, you don't have those traditional shareholders as such. So if I own Price of Football Limited as a company, then I'm a shareholder, and I can take dividends, or whoever the other shareholders are can take dividends, and so on. And with a community interest company, it's effectively controlled by sort of the trustees, and they sort of set the parameters as to the objectives of the organisation. Those objectives have to be for much broader issues in terms of providing services, providing facilities for the local community, in which appear here to be in the form of sporting facilities, and presumably, as well as having the football club playing there, there will be access. I've been to some of the ironically, to some of the National League clubs where they've got the 3 and 4G pitches, and they make quite a lot of money from those. It will be again to provide those facilities, which is absolutely great. It is in a world which is quite jaundiced and cynical at present, to see blokes of our age playing walking football, or groups of kids, or anybody just the enthusiasm and the noise, and of course the clubs make a bit of money as well from the bar and catering during those evenings, which where they're not playing football.
The noise coming from the walking football team being all me hips, all me need. Oh, this is a bad idea. I don't want to speculate on what the club might be, Kieran, or who the club might be in this situation, because that would be unfair to our old friend and name redacted. But would it be sensible to assume that, given the fact it's a community interest company, this is unlikely to be a team in the Premier League or the higher reaches of the EFL?
Yes, I think that is a fair conclusion to reach.
Okay. Our last question comes from Rob Ainley, Kieran, and I'm very interested in this question, and I'll tell you why afterwards before you answer it. Rob says, please would you be able to clarify why the postage costs to have tickets sent from Derby County are £2.50 per postage, when the cost of a second-class stamp is only 85 pence and the first-class stamp is £1.65. Is it legal to advertise postage costs as being above what the actual cost is, and for a business to profit the difference? Or do Derby as a business have a more expensive rate? It seems ludicrous that someone sending so much mail couldn't negotiate a bulk buy of stamps from Royal Mail. The reason I ask this, Kieran, is because ITV Sport, their football, their racing, if they have competitions, for example, they still have to advertise that you can apply by mail, etc. And it's always a PO box in Derby. And I've noticed that other charities as well seem to have, they use Derby. And I know certain people who use Derby as what do they call it? Not a drop box, but a kind of central place where mailers are kept. But anyway, but Derby, it seems, is at the epicentre of the Royal Mail. I wondered if there was a link between these two facts, whether there was a big sort of postage sorting centre in Derby that just happens to be next door to Derby County.
No, I can allay that is not the case.
Okay.
In respect of Derby, what they will have done is, I suspect they're not paying £1.65 or indeed 85 pence for any of this. They will have negotiated with a distributor for their postal services. In terms of what they would be claiming, it will be for the delivery service for them. They've had to get a member of staff to write down your address on the envelope. That takes time. The envelope itself, somebody physically putting them and checking them, checking your details. So do you have enough points to buy the tickets and so on? So that will be the justification. I know at Brighton we have to pay £1 per ticket for away tickets. On top of the £30, and I know some people get very angsty about it. My view, and it's still good value if you win. And there's less good value if you lose, but then so's the £30 for the ticket itself. So it's not a case of the pure cost of the stamp itself. It's more of a cost. You've got labour costs for somebody at Derby County, and those labour costs are being allocated to sending you out the tickets. When we move to a more digital framework in relation to the distribution of away tickets, and this would involve clearly a lot of coordination between both Premier League clubs and also EFL clubs. Is there the justification for that? There isn't any, but then if anybody's ever bought tickets for Ticketmaster or from Ticketmaster, you still have to go and pay a fee for delivery, even if you're just you're buying the tickets on your app and then you get a QR code. What is most disturbing about all of this is that it's £1.65 for a first class stamp in 2024, which explains why nobody sends, well, for a variety of reasons, why nobody sends letters anymore. As somebody that used to be a stamp collector in my youth, I'm absolutely appalled. There's somebody that's was always looking for a Tyrian plum, King Edward VII, tuppenny, old 2p stamp. I go to these stamps. I just might one, but it does show the inflation in postage costs.
I mean, that sounds like a Victorian euphemism, isn't it? I'm looking for I'm looking for a tuppenny plum. Oh, yes. You head yourself down to Piccadilly Circus. You'll get a tuppenny plum down there, all right, mister. One of the very many things that drives Ali up the wall is I've always got my dad's words in my head. It doesn't matter how much money you've got or haven't got, make it look like you have got it. So I always send my Christmas cards first class. Which is partly because I can't, as much as I love Christmas, I can't get my arse in gear until about the 20th to get them written. And he just says, do them early and send them second class. I said, no, looks cheap. We got to look like we got more money than we have. I send them first class because I like the idea that up and down the country, cousins of mine are going, ooh, look at him sending first class stamps from London. I'm glad you specified that this is probably for away tickets, Kieran, because my initial reaction on reading this question from Rob was it's quite reassuring / quaint that people are still getting tickets sent through the post. But as you indicate, it can't be long before that's a thing of the past, unfortunately, is it? Although I always advocate, I much prefer going to the ground because I love an excuse to go to the ground to collect tickets. But you would think that in 10 years' time, young people are going to be going, they did what? They put your ticket in an envelope and he put it in a box, and then a bloke turned up in shorts, and a dog barked at him as he put the ticket through somebody else's envelope. It does seem an odd, yeah. But I suppose you could argue in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, there will be no postal service at all, really.
In terms of what we have at present, which is universal delivery, I think that a government at some point in time is going to withdraw that obligation. I think you will have deliveries on 2 or 3 times a week in respect. You still need to sign things. I've actually got a legal document in front of me which I need to physically sign because it's been countersigned by another person. But that's a separate issue.
Has it reached that stage? Is it the Baroness is sending the legal documents through the post? She got the hump after. Only those people who are at the live gig on Thursday night will understand what I mean by that. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution as well, that'd be very kind of you. It will get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes. Christmas one's coming up, always my favourite night of the year. You go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. And as Kieran said last week, we are discussing ways of adding more value to our lovely patrons. If you have a question you'd like answered on our regular Tuesday questions pod, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter, X, and you can find us on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to buy our book, you can find details on our website, priceoffootball.com, or you can take a stroll down to your local bookshop. Well, as most of you probably need to get an Uber or a train to your local bookshop. You probably we must still be putting them in there. Is producer guys are still diligently putting paperbacks into jiffy bags and sending them out to people. Yeah, keep that postal service going. £15, only £15 delivery. How's that working out? We'll be back on Thursday with our regular news pod. There's already some big stories to discuss. The first draft of the script came through just before we went on air. Look at me, went on air before we pressed the Zencaster button this morning. Went on air. In the meantime, I shall hand over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you once again to everybody that came to the show last week. It was a great way to celebrate 5 years of the Price of Football.
Yeah,
and also to meet so many of you and sort of have a chat. And so those I got some really heartwarming gifts. I got a ticket from a Brighton match at Gillingham and that really did sort of hit me quite bad, in terms of the transformation of football since then. There's a variety of ways you can support the show. Patreon is one way, and if you do want to go Patreon, you get an advert-free version of the show, which might accelerate your listening. But there's another way you can support the show, and that's to go onto your app and give us a review. According to Producer Guy, it helps us with algorithms, helps us in the charts. We are niche. We're not trying to compete with the banter pods, which are very much at the top of the charts. But I think we do provide an educational and information service as well. It doesn't matter what you say. You could even say you could rather the show be presented by Colleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy, because having seen the legal bills that those two have managed to rack up, they could probably do with a bit of extra cash.
Well, they're in the wrong place then, Kieran. If
that's true.
They want extra cash presenting this pod, that would be a cracking, wouldn't it? Colleen and Rebecca. Oh, well, we'll get Nick DeMarco involved in that one as well. And I'd like to say a big thank you to Peter Jones, AFC Wimbledon fan, who came along and gave us those tickets the other night as a present. It was very much appreciated. So thank you, Peter. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.